Welcome to the Leadership Secrets Podcast, where we bring you no BS, practical advice from the experts that are doing it. Now, here's your host, Lee Lisenby.
Welcome to the Leadership Secrets Podcast. This is your host, Lee Lisenby. Today's a great day here in Texas. I actually got some rain today. It's been a kind of a drought, so that'd be a little bit better of a mood than most days because I haven't seen rain in quite some time. The heat wave's been killing us. So this is our No BS podcast. We bring leaders on here that have done it before, leaders who are doing it, really professional leaders out there in the industry. Today, I'm super excited. I got a hero of mine, person who wrote a book, probably my favorite business book I've ever read, The 4 Disciplines of Execution. I've read this book. I have only a few hard copies of books. Most of my books are digital versions. I think these are only 2 hard copy leadership books I have, Leadership and the 4DX. But our guest today is Jim Huling. Jim, how you doing, man?
Awesome, brother. Thank you so much for having me on today.
And honor's all mine. I really do appreciate it. I feel like I'm interviewing my hero here. Just so excited to get you on, and I know you got so much to share with our listeners. Happy to I'm going to sit back and let you do a lot. Jim, as I mentioned, has written the #1 best-selling book, The 4 Disciplines of Execution, co-author on that book. But he's also served as CEO of multiple companies, one Fortune 500 company, or was working in a Fortune 500 company, but also a company he served as CEO that was voted the best place to work four times, I believe, as a CEO. So not only has Jim done it, but Jim has done it very, very well and at a high level. And I guess his most proud accomplishment is his wife of 40 years, Donna, sweetheart Donna. So we want to mention that. We love family here, we love culture, and we just love all those pieces about life, and that's what makes us all unique in our own ways. And also, something I want to get talking about Jim is he's a 3rd-degree black belt in Taekwondo, so someone you might not want to mess with. So Jim, I kind of gave you a little intro there. I know I probably didn't do it justice, but maybe just give us a little bit about yourself. Sure, background, what you're currently doing, maybe some passions of yours.
Cool. Happy to talk about it. So first of all, thanks for having me on. I really like you and I like this podcast. I get a lot of requests and I'm not, I try to say yes as much as I can. I can't always do it, but I was really quick to say yes to you, Lee, because you were talking about, one, a lot of the people who listen to you, maybe all, but the vast majority of the people who listen to you are people who've actually done things rather than who talk about doing things. And the older I get, the more I appreciate that distinction. I mean, especially nowadays, there's a lot of people on the internet world who have good things to say. I'm not trying to be cynical about it. They may be smart and have great ideas, but there's a difference. You can hear the difference, can't you? When a person is talking about something they've actually done versus talking about something that they simply understand. It's 2 different. You can sort of hear depth in their conversation, can't you? And so that's one of the reasons I like you and I like this podcast. And I was really honored to be your guest today.
I can't thank you enough for being on. I think after I read your book, multiple times, I implemented the 4DX at my previous company, and I just fell in love with the whole book. I mean, everything about it. And I saw it work very, very well at that company. But in doing so, I got to read through it multiple times. I mean, it's over and over and over, trying to get it down. And then I think I followed you on LinkedIn because I saw, hey, this is the author of the 4DX book. I was surprised you even accepted my like on LinkedIn. Like, oh, now I'm friends with Jim Huling.
Sure.
But then when you
one step below Bon Jovi. It's not quite Bon Jovi.
But then you responded to my message for being on this podcast, and I ran to my wife like, you'll never believe this. And I have this book in my hand, like, this guy agreed to be on our podcast. It was a great day here in the Lisenby household. So.
Yeah, I want all my friends to hear you say those things because I don't think they hold me in the same high regard that you do. So I'm saying, hey, look, here's my new friend. Look at how he talks about me, guys.
By the way, for our listeners out there, we agreed before the recording that we are now friends, brand new friends, but we're friends. So that's great. One of the privileges of having a podcast, I guess.
Yes, sir.
So I know your hobbies. I've seen some of your posts on LinkedIn. You're now in CrossFit. I've seen you deadlift what seemed like 500 pounds on one clip, or
400, yeah. But
it was 400.
Yeah, and Lee, this is a little bit of a funny story. We'll get right to business for those of you that are listening in. But I'm now in CrossFit. I've always done one thing or another physically, most all of my life, But I've been in CrossFit 9 years, and I just love it. And Lee, I hate to tell you this, I won't do it on your podcast, but I'm one of those obnoxious CrossFit people. Like, let's talk about CrossFit. But it really transformed my life, and here I am. For anybody who's watching this podcast doesn't know, I'm 68 years old this year, but thanks to the training and the things I've learned, I'm actually stronger today than I was in high school. And my current pursuit is a 400-pound deadlift, which I'll hit this year. You saw a video of me at 385 last week, and I've got 4 months left to hit that goal, and I plan to do it. So I'm a big fan of CrossFit. I know there's a lot of ways to exercise, and not one way is right for everybody. I certainly understand that. No need to email me if you don't like CrossFit, but I really do, and it's made a huge difference in my life.
Yeah, it's 68, and you're stronger now than you were in high school.
Man, I could bench press more than I could in high school. That's that funny.
That's amazing, actually.
Lee, do you mind? What a beautiful segue. We talk about that. Let's segue over to two things you and I are both passionate about: execution and leadership. How about if we migrate over there for the folks that are hearing us? And do you mind if I just open up with a thought or two, and then please join in, because you know 40X. You probably know it as well as I do. Chime in here and lend your voice to this. But I tell you one thing I'll start with, especially in a no BS podcast. What a tagline! That's awesome. I find that there are millions and millions of leaders in the world, but particularly in the United States, who want to talk about strategy all the time, and they get kind of. Tell me if you've had this experience, Lee, but they get caught up in strategy. Strategy's like this dream. They're talking about the dream, and we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and here's why we're going to do that. And I'm not saying it's not valuable, because if you don't have a strategy, you don't really know where you're going. I'm a fan of strategy, but what I'm not a fan of is strategy without execution. Because strategy without execution it's just like a hallucination, isn't it, really? I mean, it doesn't really mean very much. But the tragedy is we put 90% of our energy into strategy, and we give only 10% of whatever's left to how we could become world-class at execution. So I think this is one of the things that Chris McChesney and I, we started with this book. We were really very passionate about saying strategy is great. Strategy alone is not really very valuable. You need execution to make the strategy worth having been developed. And then we got really pragmatic about it. We did not want to write. In fact, I hope you'll find this to be a funny story. One of the original ideas was to call this the 4 principles of execution. And we're all sitting around one day saying, principles of execution. It doesn't sound like a book any of us would pick up and buy, because it sounds like a book full of ideas with no advice at all on how to go do them, And so Chris or one of the other people came up with this idea. Well, why don't we call them disciplines, man? They're disciplines, And we all thought, that's perfect. That's the perfect name, because they're really simple. In fact, tell me if you agree with this. Each of those 4 disciplines is not very intellectual. They're really simple things. I mean, we'll talk about them today if you like. They're just hard to do. So that's where the discipline is not in the understanding. The discipline's in the doing of them. But because they're simple, I think that's why you find this book today, the best-selling book in the history of the world on the subject of goal setting and execution, and now in 16 languages all over the world. I think it's because it's simple. You can, or tell me if you agree, please, but you can pick it up, you can read it, you can understand it, you can implement it with your team. You can certainly get world-class help from Franklin Covey on implementing as well. But it makes those concepts accessible, which is what the more intellectual books don't seem to do. They seem to all want to talk about strategy. But would you respond to that? How do you feel? Because you're a
No,
real person and you really did it.
totally agree. And, I think oftentimes in my, I guess call it my career, I won't name the part of my career, but oftentimes I get stuck in these meeting rooms and it's a lot of talk. And we talk about the same things from the last meeting, from the last week, the last month. We look at spreadsheets, we look at reports, we look at KPIs, and then I'm sitting there thinking, guys, I mean, this is all great, but what are we doing about it? It's a bunch of input and very little output. Absolutely correct.
That's really powerful the way you said that, and that's really so true. And the beautiful thing for Chris and I, and really everybody who was involved in the creation of this book, I think we were tired of it too. We just didn't want to write another book full of ideas that just went on the shelf, had a nice cover, sold some copies or whatever, but in the end didn't help anybody. We turned that around. We wanted to write a book that would help people. And Lee, there's one small story, if you don't mind me telling it quickly, but I'll preface it by saying I've been on a lot of podcasts and I've never told this story. This is the first time I've ever felt it was right to tell this story. When Chris and I sat down to write this book, we realized quickly that we needed to be clear about who we were writing to.
Yeah.
Are we writing to a CEO? Are we writing to a VP of Ops? Are we writing to a frontline leader? Who is this book for? And so we literally crafted a description of the person we were writing to. We called him Joe, and we figured Joe was a middle manager in a mid-sized construction company or a manufacturing company in the Midwest. And Joe was about 41 years old, and Joe had all the issues every single day of getting a group of people passionate to engage and work hard and strive for excellence in the work that otherwise might seem to be pretty day to day, and it was something about the clarity of that all along the way, it took 18 months to write the book. All along the way, Chris and I would say, now, wait a minute, what would Joe say about what we're, and sometimes we imagine Joe would say, hey guys, come down out of the clouds. Talk to us real people down here who are trying to execute, or would say, you're making that sound more complicated than it is. Joe would say to us, can you say that a little more simply, So there is no Joe, except there are Joes, they're the equivalent.
I'm Joe.
You're an example that really, we accomplished that mission. We wrote a book for people who actually execute, not people who talk about or think about or oversee execution, but for people who really do it. Do you think we accomplished that mission?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I am your avatar that you created, Joe. Like, that's who I am. So, yeah, that's probably why I love it so much. You wrote it for me, Jim. I appreciate that.
Just for you. And it'd be great if it was just. Do you think your listeners would appreciate if we were really quick about saying what the 4 disciplines are? I'm a little bit mindful of somebody driving their car listening to you and me. They may be saying, okay, guys, you got me interested, but what the heck are these 4 disciplines? Is that all right? We just cover them 1, 2, 3, 4? Yeah,
absolutely.
Be quick, because you can spend a long time just talking about what they are, but I think we have other topics we want to get to today. But if we just say it real simply, there first of all, there are only 4 of them, and each one of them represents a very precise, disciplined implementation that, when you put them together, creates extraordinary results. So if I tell everybody what the 4 are, I want to start by saying, don't think of them as a menu that you choose individual ones. Don't come away from this conversation and say, hey, I really like discipline 2 and 4, Lee. I think I'm going to do those 2, because you're not going to get the same results. The 4 things go together and they compound each other. So that's an important thing to know as we start. So discipline 1 is the discipline of focus. And it's based on the simplest idea in the world. And I bet you know this idea already, but you should have written your book. You would have this in there. If everything is priority 1, the truth is nothing's priority 1. Now that's a real truth. You ask any manager on a factory floor, or any construction boss, anybody that has to lead a team of frontline people who are doing real work, would tell you that if you make everything priority 1, you might as well say nothing's priority.
Right.
So the beauty of discipline one is it requires us to focus. And what we mean by focus is we simply have to decide what outcome matters more than any other outcome.
Yeah.
Now, matters more can be defined by a company. Sometimes matters more means to our bottom line, or sometimes matters more means to our growth, or sometimes matters more means to our shareholders, or whatever. Everybody's got to make that decision. But the key is, it doesn't matter what you choose. It only matters that you choose. You have to have the rigorous discipline to say, this is the number one thing for this period of time in this organization. Discipline two, I really hope you'll chime in on this, Lee, because I'm interested to see it through your eyes. Discipline two is the really radical part of the four disciplines. It's a thing very few leaders have ever really done. So if you're listening to me and Lee today, we're just going to say it in a real simple way. Discipline two is identifying the one or two actions or behaviors that are the true drivers of achieving that goal. Now, this answer might be different for every team. If you have let's say you have a goal of profitability in a particular segment of a company. Well, the marketing team's behaviors to drive that goal are going to be different than the manufacturing teams or the product design team's behaviors to drive that goal. But the idea holds true that for every team, you decide what are the things you can do that have the greatest impact on achieving the goal. We call this the discipline of leverage because you're finding the few things that deliver the biggest result. Now here again, anybody driving your car or eating a sandwich, that's not hard either, is it? But you know what is hard? If you go to a leader, let's say you go to a leader of a sales team and you say, well, hey, what are the behaviors that drive sales? Every leader in the world can give you 40 behaviors that drive sales. I mean, they're just, and that applies to any discipline at all, in my experience. Here, take a seat. Let me give you an hour. I'll tell you all the behaviors that drive sales. That's great. But then if you say, well, which two drive sales more than all the others? And then there's this silence that falls across the room.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't mind, I'll have a moment of true confession here. I've been a leader a long time, and I've been a leader at the highest level and a leader in different industries and companies and all around the country. I don't think I ever understood this, that it's not enough to set a goal and then say, okay, everybody, do all the things you need to do to make that goal happen. That's actually a pretty meaningless leadership activity. Yeah. But what's strong is when you say, and here are the two things we're going to concentrate on, because we know the more of those we do, the greater the results will be. So for that example of a sales team, it might be that face-to-face meetings with customers that deliver the biggest result. Now here again, anybody driving your car or eating a sandwich, that's not hard either, is it? But you know what is hard? If you go to a leader, let's say you go to a leader of a sales team and you say, well, hey, what are the behaviors that drive sales? Every leader in the world can give you 40 behaviors that drive sales. I mean, they're just, and that applies to any discipline at all, in my experience. Here, take a seat. Let me give you an hour. I'll tell you all the behaviors that drive sales. That's great. But then if you say, well, which two drive sales more than all the others? And then there's this silence that falls across the room. Mm-hmm. And if you don't mind, I'll have a moment of true confession here. I've been a leader a long time, and I've been a leader at the highest level and a leader in different industries and companies and all around the country. I don't think I ever understood this, that it's not enough to set a goal and then say, okay, everybody, do all the things you need to do to make that goal happen. That's actually a pretty meaningless leadership activity. Yeah. But what's strong is when you say, and here are the two things we're going to concentrate on, because we know the more of those we do, the greater the results will be. So for that example of a sales team, it might be that face-to-face meetings with customers is the behavior that drives more sales. Right. So there's 30 other things you got to do to be a salesperson, of course. But the thing you put your bet on, like chips in a roulette wheel in Vegas, is you say, I bet if we double the number of face-to-face meetings, we'll end up with more sales. We still got to do other things. It's not the only thing we're going to do, but we put our bet on the behaviors that we believe or the actions we believe will yield the greatest return. That's why we call it the discipline of leverage.
Mm-hmm.
Do a little in order to get back a lot. So that's discipline 2. So 1 is focus, 2 is about leverage, 3 is about engagement. Now, engagement is a tricky thing, because, and I'm older than you, Lee, and anybody watching this podcast already sees that I'm older than you. But I think we both grew up in a time when people would say to us, that's why we call it work. It's not supposed to be fun. And in my day, it would have been son. It's not supposed to be fun, son.
Right.
Why we call that work, right? And I bet they can really say that in Texas too, can't they, Lee? Come out just right.
Had a lot here in Texas for sure.
And when somebody says that, you have no doubt what they're saying, do you? I mean, it's pretty clear. This is
Right.
Well, it turns out though that if that's all you got, you're never going to see a team of people rise to their highest level. I mean, first of all, who can do something all the time for a long time and do it at the highest level when there's literally no joy in it? Who can do that? I can't. Can you?
No.
I can't do it. I got to have some fun along the way. So the thing we discovered was that if you set it up in the right way, you can make the achievement of the goal feel like a game. In other words, you can literally, and if anybody who's skeptical listening to this, I totally get it. You should be skeptical. Call Lee, let him tell you his story. Well, don't call him all at once because he has a real job. But you get the idea of it, that you really can set up a scoreboard and a competition and a tracking of results in a way that kind of gets people energized about winning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that spirit of winning that we found in discipline 3. Now, discipline 3 is the discipline of engagement. So that's about how do you get people to not just show up and do the job and go home, but how do you get them to really want to achieve this goal? The same way you would want them to try to win if they were playing for the state championship or something. So that's discipline 3. And then the last one of all, discipline 4, which is the big one, the discipline of accountability. So discipline 4 is about having a regular cadence of accountability. And what that means is every team has their own meeting every week. And in that meeting, everybody on the team becomes accountable to each other for whether they did their part last week. So in other words, everybody on the team, like let's say you and I were a team, and I would say, hey, this week, I'm going to get with the people in IT and we're going to try to solve that problem we're having with the system so we can stop having all these breakdowns. And that's my commitment. I'm going to go reach out to IT. I'm going to spend time with them, show them the problem, see if I can get that fixed. You might say, well, if I'm Lee, I'd say, well, I just hired 2 new guys and I'm going to get them both trained. It'll take a little extra effort. I'm going to have to make time for it this week, but that's probably the most important thing I can do, because the faster they're trained, the faster they help us achieve our goal. So you and I would both say that out loud. But here's the interesting part. We come back a week later and we have to say out loud whether we did it or we didn't. And Lee, you probably are such a high performer, you have no experience with this, but if you've ever been in a meeting where you made a public commitment and 1 week later you have to say, man, I didn't get it done. The first time you have that moment, you make a big decision in your career. You say, I am never going to be in this spot again, because it's terrible. It's a terrible moment. But what's healthy about that is over time, a team learns that if you say you're going to do it, you got to do it. And if you say you're going to do it and then you don't do it, you let the whole team down, because you didn't just commit to your boss, you committed to all of us that you were going to do your part. And we committed to you that we were going to do our part, and that's how we get great together. And anybody who doesn't do that, usually only because they were busy, starts to feel like they let everybody down. And I don't mean that we make them feel ashamed or anything like that. We don't use any technique like that. We just let the accountability sort of hang in the air for a minute. And most people will say, won't happen again next week. Sorry, guys, won't happen again. Well, the minute that happens, a whole team just went to another level, because now they're starting to learn they can trust each other. where they'll do what they say they'll do. And people who learn they can trust each other, Lee, and I really want to stop and let you chime in here now. But as soon as you start learning you can trust the people you work with, it's not very long before you start respecting the people you work with.
Right.
And that's how a team transforms most of the time into being world class and feeling like they're winners. My mother used to say, put your shoulders back. It's they feel like that. They walk a little different. They have kind of a swagger. So that's the 4 disciplines all taken together with just a little of my commentary on what makes them interesting. How about you, my friend? Now you've done them, so you're an expert. Does that match your experience?
For first, that was an excellent overview of the book. I wish I'd had that in the very beginning. Kind of understand the pieces a little bit differently. But there's so many questions I have. I mean, as you're going through this, I'm thinking of different things about it, but I don't want to. I know you got a hard stop to top of the hour, so I could talk about this for hours myself. But that scoreboard piece I found. I think y'all mentioned this in the book. We've made some here and there, and people hate the color red. If they have a red dot by their name or red X by their name, that within itself is pretty powerful.
Yes.
And nobody wants that. Nobody wants to be red.
That's so
and
great.
Then we had I just had a turtle walk by my window.
Oh my gosh. That's a sign. That's an omen. People love to talk about how complicated human beings are, and we are complex creatures. I get that. But the funny thing you're talking about is in discipline 3, everybody who's listening, we do this radical thing. We let a team build their own scoreboard. So that they figure out what they want it to look like. If they want to have a team name, they put it up there, they design how they want the tracking to be. But we have everybody use the color green to always mean on target and the color red to always mean below target. And Lee, I'm right with you. I have seen people that would sort of figuratively crawl over broken glass to get that red off that scoreboard. They hate that color. Right. And then you step back as a leader and you're like, well, I've been trying to get them to do this for months. You mean just because it's red, everybody's all excited now? And then we would just say, well, it's part of it. It's part of the formula of what gets people to perform. Is that clear, visible accountability that comes with the color green or the color red.
Yeah, it is powerful. Yeah, I may, if you're okay with it, I mean, I could talk about 4DX again for a couple of hours, but since I only have 20 minutes left with you here, maybe jump into some leadership, maybe more strategy.
Hey, that's right. Yeah, let's do it, man. Because I'll tell you, I've been alive longer than you, and so I think I can say with a little bit of my elder credentials that I have never seen a time in my life when I felt leadership was more needed. Leadership in every sense, operational leadership in a company, but moral leadership and philosophical leadership and innovative leadership. We really are needing leaders and leadership to go to another level because the magnitude of our challenges today seem to be at another level, and so I really love talking about that a little bit. And one thing that you said to me we were getting to know each other before the podcast, we were talking about frontline leaders. And I'm just going to say it for the record. Anybody who wants to quote me is welcome to quote me because I believe this with all my heart. The most underappreciated people in the world are frontline leaders. And yet, everybody who's been in business more than 7 minutes knows that it's the front line that produces the bottom line.
Right.
It's not all those layers between the front line and the CEO that produce the bottom line. In fact, I have said to many audiences of senior leaders, and I'm not being cynical about senior leaders, they're valuable too. I'm just talking about the subject. I've said to them, gosh, Lee, imagine this for a minute, 200 senior leaders in a room. And I say, if anybody doubts that the front line produces the bottom line, I challenge you to send them all home next week and tell me what the production results were. Man, everybody in the room is trying to decide who hired me to speak that day because that's not popular to say things like that. And nobody, don't misunderstand me now or misquote me. I'm not saying senior leaders aren't valuable. They're crucial. Yeah. But I'm saying we forget that frontline leadership, that's where the action is. That's where the mud and the grit and the dirt of production is. And so
Right.
we tend to undervalue frontline leadership. And frankly, in my opinion, I've been a CEO for a long time. We tend to overvalue executive leadership, in my opinion. Let's do a shout out, you and me, to frontline leaders, the people that are closer to the action, because they're the ones that are really paying a price and doing a very hard job. And so we talk about that. That's one of the things I'm the proudest of at 40X, because remember, 40X was written for Joe.
Yeah.
40X wasn't written for Elon Musk, although I hope he loves the book and he's welcome to buy 6 million copies tomorrow if he wants to. I mean, I like Elon Musk. I hold him in high regard as an innovator, but it wasn't written for them. It was really written for the person at that front line who's getting things done. And then if you've seen the second edition, we added a piece which was the equivalent of that for senior leaders. So we've now addressed both parts of a leadership team, the frontline leaders and the senior leaders. It takes both to get stuff done. But that's one of the things I love about 40X. It makes it a practical book rather than, as we said before, a theoretical one.
Yeah, one thing you were talking about a minute ago about, work being work, the kind of old school mentality. Some things that I've been seeing lately, I want to get your take on it, is that there's this got a leaf blower now. There's this kind of like leadership approach where it worked well 20, 30 years ago. But leadership has changed and evolved so much in the last couple of years. Even COVID has done a lot for that, changing how we lead people. A great resignation in 2021.
Right.
Then you got the millennials and zennials coming in the workforce. I feel like almost, I don't want to say daily, but almost every day it seems like our strategy, our philosophies, our approach is different than it was. What's your thoughts on the new, how it's evolving? Maybe.
I appreciate you asking me that, and I'm honored to answer the question. And I have a clear feeling, Lee, that your listeners would just as value just as much your perspective on this question. But I'm honored that you give me a second to try to respond. So can I say to everybody who's going to be listening to this podcast who follows you, you're the guy that's bringing this information. Please don't get mad at me when I say this. that I think the Great Resignation is one of the best things that's ever happened to the American workforce. I'm not really qualified to talk about international workforce, but I think it's one of the best things. And before you turn me off, let me just say why I think that is. Because in my day, and you might say even a little bit in your day, Lee, I don't know, leadership and work performance lacked a human element for a long time. I worked for a whole bunch of people who would say, hey, Jim, this is the job. And if you can't do the job, we'll find somebody who can do the job. But if you're not happy doing the job, there's 8 other people in line outside the door. They'd love to have your job. I had those words said to me at 22 years old once, And by the way, I probably needed to hear them. I might have been a little full of myself that day. But you get the idea of it, that we didn't really care. And there are a lot of people whose bosses made them feel they couldn't take a sick day, or they've earned vacation days, but they shouldn't take them because they should be committed to the team, or they're paid for 5 days a week, but everybody here works 6.5. There were things that we accepted as normal that were really wrong.
Right.
And those things had to somehow come to a point of visibility, and COVID is what brought them to that point of visibility. So I'm not saying everything that everybody's done in the Great Resignation and everybody who has said goodbye to their job with no notice or whatever, I'm not saying that those are the right things. I don't think that they are. But I am saying that we are now more alert and more focused on creating environments and cultures and team leadership that makes people want to come to work. Yeah. Instead of assuming that they're going to come to work because they need a job, and all we really have to do is pay them and provide some benefits. Instead of that being the oversimplified equation, right, we've added a piece now that says, does this work mean something? Does it make a difference in the world? Can you be proud of the work we're doing? Do you feel like you're part of this team? Do you feel like you're a valued member of the group? And even, are we investing in you to help you grow and develop? All of that now is suddenly a requirement. Right. And I think we should have been that way all along, in my opinion. And maybe I was some that way, but I wasn't enough either. I've had my own evolution. I know more today than I did. And Lee, if you don't mind, one last thought is I also think you cannot have a conversation about this without talking about empathy. And I know empathy is a really popular word now, and all the leadership gurus on LinkedIn are putting posts out about empathy, including Jim had a post about empathy. But I really think we need posts about empathy because we have a lot of catching up to do. We as leaders implement things in the past without a moment's thought of what it would feel like if we were on the receiving end of that change.
Right.
Isn't that the truth? We've done it. We've done it all of our leadership lives, right? If it's good for the company, it ought to be good for everybody because they got a job. Well, I'm sorry, but that logic is just too simplistic now. The world's more complex than that. And a lot of people have said, it doesn't have to be all about me. That would be wrong too. But they are saying, I need to matter. You need to tell me why we're doing something. Don't just tell me what to do. Help me understand why it's important. Maybe I'll do it in a better way if you do that. We need to work for people who aren't substitute mommies and daddies for us. We're not saying that. But we want to work for people who care about us, who to whom it makes a difference if we're struggling or we need some help. Everybody wants to work for somebody like that. Well, I'm being a little long-winded, and I apologize, but you got me on a topic that I feel is really urgent in the world today. And
Yep.
where we were is not right. And where we are right now may not be perfect. The pendulum never stops in the perfect middle. It just swings back and forth. But I really like the swing we've done now. I think we've humanized the business of leadership in a way that will probably never completely unravel. It'll stay with us, and we'll think more about the people who work for us as human beings than just business assets.
Well, I think that you hit on a good piece on that. And one thing, I haven't really thought about this until you said it, but we're really digging into our culture. I mean, company culture is because, I had a CEO tell me the other day, he's like, we can't just keep paying our guys more to stay. Like we're going to price ourselves out of the market. I mean, keep paying and paying and paying, and we're not going to be competitive. We got to figure out the culture piece. Now, someone who might have not even thought about culture, vision, purpose, engagement, empathy is now that's on the front. It's on the front lines right now of how can we do this?
That's right. And a few years ago, we would have taken all those topics you just said, and they would be in the "wouldn't that be nice" category.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now they're in the "we got to do this" category.
Right.
So I think that's good, don't you? And
absolutely.
Don't tell me if I'm out of bounds here now, but I can't help but just say 1 second. That's one reason I'm so proud to have been associated for 15 years with the Franklin Covey Company. I think they've been preaching those values and ways of thinking about people ever since Dr. Stephen Covey wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But now we need it. Now we need it more than we ever have, and now it's in the spotlight. Where look, you and me, here we are talking about it on your podcast. So that's how it's become. It's a front topic now, and I'm really glad about that. And I hope the end result of all this is that we have a better world and a better workplace for everybody, me included, me and you included, going forward.
Yeah, I'm really quick. I want to get a little personal. I was curious. I see great leaders like yourself who have done it at such a high level for so long. What are some of your personal development habits, maybe professional development habits? Do you have any?
Oh my gosh, yeah. In fact, if people who know me well heard you ask me this question, they would say, "Oh no, Jim's going to go an hour on this," which I won't do. We don't have time for that. But I will share with you a list of several things. I have 3 things that I think are really important. Let me just try to say them simply. And Lee, you have to tell me. I have a little handout about my routines that keep me at my peak, which I would gladly give you, and then you could send that link to any of your listeners who wanted it. I hope that's not inappropriate for me to offer that. It's totally free, and it's just a gift that they might find interesting. But what I'm saying is coming from that little document that I have, because so many people have asked me that question over the years. So I think 3 things really matter the most. Number 1 is if you hadn't spent 10 minutes in your life saying, why am I here? What's my real purpose? Then it's time. I don't care when you do it. I don't care how you do it. I don't care if you're a person who goes up on a mountaintop and meditates, or you do what I do. I have a cup of coffee every morning looking at the lake outside my backyard, but they're both spiritual places. You got to think about, why am I here? Am I here simply to trade my hours for some dollars and be done? I don't think so. I think we came here to do a lot more than that. So number one is work to find some sense of purpose. Start small. Try to figure out what it is. I like the question, Lee, of how do I want to be remembered? If I just think about my life, someday I'm going to be gone. I'll be gone before you, Lee, but someday we're both going to be gone. And so I think it's a powerful question when you're having that morning cup of coffee to say, how do I want to be remembered? That's a purpose type question. Or, do I feel called to something? Do I feel called to be a leader? Look at you, for example. You already have a really important day job, but you somehow feel called to help teach other people powerful principles. And you're I guarantee you're not a podcast millionaire yet, but you're using your personal time to have a podcast, to invite people on, to spread the message. You have part of your calling is to help other people understand some principles that will help them have better lives and be better leaders. So point number one, I think, please, everybody, you'll be so glad if you spend a minute thinking about your purpose. And then second is to think about in the whole circle of your life, are you giving the best you have to the people and the things that matter most? Now, I got to be real careful with that, Lee, because I know a whole lot of people who say, I give everything I have to my job. If I have a little bit of energy left over, I can watch some TV and have dinner, and then I got to get up the next day and do it all again. And sometimes that's honorable because we're doing that in order to support the people we care about, ourselves and others. So sometimes that's what we got. That's what we do. But I will say, everything you can do that goes beyond that, that says, here's what I do for other people. Here's how I show up for the people who matter most. Here's how I make time to go to the ball game or have the dinner or remember the birthday. Those things. You're going to finish this life, and believe me, before you finish this life, you're going to be finished with your job. And about 7 minutes after you leave your job, they're not even going to remember you worked there. And that's not a bad thing. But I'm just saying that's the way it is. Life moves on. Companies move on. But the people in your life are there forever. And they're the ones that are going to be there with you when all that other stuff is gone. So if you live your whole life, you never make a minute for investing in those other relationships, I think you're going to end up regretting that very deeply. And then last of all, and you tell me if we're out of time, is I'm not an athlete by any stretch of anybody's imagination, never. But I have really learned that if I take care of my physical health, everything else is then possible. And if my physical health crumbles, nothing is possible. I got this now. So yes, I'm really careful about what I eat. Yes, I work out 4 times a week, but I'm not crazy about it, and I enjoy a pizza and a beer just like anybody else does. But I'm really paying attention because I realize now my ability to work another 10 years, which is I hope what I get the chance to do in the world, is almost exclusively dependent on my having the physical capacity to be able to do it. So I'm not trying to be a health nut kind of guy. I'm just saying, think of it like a business person. If you had an expensive piece of equipment, would you never change the oil? Would you never tune it up? Would you never clean the pistons? I mean, no, if you had a classic car, you'd baby it like it was a child, probably, right? Well, what about your body? Isn't your body worth as much as a car, But I'm not being critical. I'm just saying I know a whole lot of people that pay way more attention to their car than they do to their health.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
When that health breaks down, it's gone, man. So those 3 things are things that I work on really hard: purpose and people, and then physical. So they all start with P, but physical capacity. Those are the 3 things I put a lot of energy into. And if anybody's interested, I have this little handout about my whole 7-part system that I use to be doing CrossFit at 68 years old. People are intrigued by that, Lee, because that's
Yeah, send that to me. I'll put that in the show notes and also put it on my LinkedIn post. Really quick, in the last few minutes, I always get recommendations on books. These are two books I always recommend. That's why I have them here. One's yours.
Read them both.
The other one's It's Your Ship. You got a book other than 4DX?
I do. In fact, Lee, tell me, and I should have cleared this with you before. I have a second little PDF of the 16 books that have impacted my life the most. I've read more than 1,000 books in my life. And if you want that, I'll send that, and your readers could, in 30 seconds, you got all 16 of the books that helped to shape me. Now, I'm not saying that's the gold standard. Maybe they're, but maybe that'd be helpful. But two books I really recommend all the time. And one of them is the finest leadership. One of them is the most impactful book I've ever read in my life is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Yeah. And every time I say it, people roll their eyes now because they're like, oh, yeah, that's so yesterday. Man, that just tells me you hadn't read it, because I read it every year. And every year I find a page I never saw before, or I understand it in a way. So The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the most influential book on my life outside of any sort of spiritual writing. Second, the best leadership book I ever read in my life is Leadership from the Inside Out by Kevin Cashman. And I'm not bragging now, but I'm not kidding either. I stopped keeping a list of the books I'd read when I got to 1,000. I just got tired of the list. But so I'm way past 1,000 books now. And that book is the best leadership book I've ever read. Leadership from the Inside Out by Kevin Cashman, who, by the way, happens to be the CEO of a really huge company. I probably don't have permission to say the name, but he's a legit person who's not only written about it, he's actually done it. The kind of guy you and I really respect.
I've never heard of that book.
It's a fabulous book. And every time I recommend it, Lee, people say, I've never heard of that book. And I just like, how can this be true? It's the greatest leadership book I've ever read in my life. And then I have a final book, which is a little bit of a different recommendation, if you don't mind it. I should have cleared all this with you up front. I would have if I'd been thinking about it. But I have a book called The Alchemist, which is a story. This book is so powerful in my life that my sweetheart gave me a leather-bound signed copy of this, because I have given away about 100 copies of this book. But it's called The Alchemist. And it's by Paulo Coelho. It's not a hard book to find. It's the best-selling fiction book of its category in the history of the world. 68 million copies of this book have been sold. But for your leaders, for your listeners who are very practical people, this is a fable now. So it's a way of absorbing some truths by reading the fictional story of something that happened. So that one is kind of unusual in my list of 3 recommendations, but it's, I say with great truth, I've given away more than 100 copies of that book in my life. It's a powerful book. And again, every time you read it, you'll say, this was not in here the last time I read this. It's that kind of book. So those 3, that's a lovely collection, because those 3 books couldn't be more different than anything in the
I haven't read those 2 books, so I've read several hundred, or maybe 300, 400 by now, but I need to add those to my list.
Please do, man. And I'll send you that list of the 16 books that have impacted me most, and I'll send you what I call my perfect day playbook, my set of practices for nutrition and exercise and breathing and things that I do to keep my capacity high. We'll make those 2 gifts you can give all your folks if you want.
Before you jump off, what's your one leadership secret? And by that, I mean, what's one thing that very few leaders are doing, but everyone should be doing?
Wow. I saw this. You sent me this question in the preparation work, and I know what my answer to that question is. And I'm going to be really, as authentic as I hope I've been for 45 minutes of, I'm a little bit scared to tell you this answer because I'm afraid people won't value the answer or they won't think it's meaningful. I don't know, but I'm still going to say it. The one thing that I have done in my life, I do it better today than I did years ago, but I've done it consistently, is I genuinely love the people who work for me. I just love them. That's all I can say. And I'm not trying to impose a system of belief on your listeners at all. I'm just saying love is the most powerful force on earth. And if I can become a leader who finds a way, and Lee, it's okay, isn't it, to say some people are easier to love than others. But if I can be a leader who makes every one of those people feel that even though I hold them accountable, I still care about them. I still love them. I want them to be successful. I can lead from that place, I think I can be a leader who really makes a difference in the world, not only in the performance of our team, but who makes a difference maybe in that person's life going forward. So that's my secret, and I realize that's not what you hear every single day from.
No, actually, my last guest said the same thing. Katrina Gazarian.
Really?
Yeah, she's huge love. Yeah,
It's huge love, big love for everybody, and thank goodness now, we've reached a place in our evolution where that makes more tangible sense to a leader than 5 years ago. If I'd said that, people would roll their eyes and say, "Come on, Jim, we got work to get done." But now we're starting to understand what a powerful force love can be. So there you have it. It's
ahead of your
controversial.
time. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that answer for sure. Jim,
Awesome.
where can people find you?
Yeah, this couldn't be easier. My name is Jim Huling, and you just do jimhuling.com. So it's JIMHULING, jimhuling.com. And that will take you to my website where you can see all of my programs, everything that I've got out there. And if you don't mind, one last comment. Every single day of my life, I post what I hope is a meaningful thought on 3 social media platforms: LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. By the way, it's the same post. So if you see it one place, don't go looking for it in another. It's the same thing. But it's just Jim Huling, JIMHULING, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Every day, the last 283 days, I have posted consistently, without missing a day, something I felt was valuable. So I'm sort of trying to give what I know out to the world, a tablespoon at a time, through those posts. And so anybody who's found what I said today to be of interest or value, welcome to go there, and you'll get a tablespoonful every single morning of your life. And I hope you find that valuable as well.
Yeah, I can testify. Those are very valuable. Ever since I've been following, I guess the last 280 something days, I'm on there every day. So those are good little posts.
That's how we became friends, isn't it? Just through that. So awesome. Awesome. Hey,
well, thanks for being my friend, Jim. I know you got to go. Go ahead. You have something else?
Well, I only just wanted to say the same thing you were saying. Thank you. I'm really honored to be on this podcast. This is the No BS podcast. And that's refreshing. I mean, you're doing something that matters in the world, and everything that is great today was small yesterday. From small beginnings come great outcomes. That's what you're doing. So I just encourage you to keep the faith, believe in what you're doing, believe in whatever impulse made you want to do all this on top of your, I'm sure, demanding day job. Stay with it, believe in it, man. That's a calling that you've got. And I'm just honored to have been a little bitty part of the great story of your life, brother.
Well, you've been a huge part of it. I mean, that message you shared today, you dropped a lot of bombs there, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. You're welcome.
Well, let's catch up sometime in the future.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let our friendship die here.
Yeah, when everybody's gotten past everything I said so far, call me back, and we'll have another conversation, see if that adds another chapter to our friendship.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Jim.
Take care.
Good day, man.
Thank you for tuning in to the Leadership Secrets Podcast. Please join us next time as we bring you more leadership secrets from the people who are actually doing it. See you soon.